Okay, hi guys. Today I want to talk about the terrorism of irrationality. So the Pythagorean Illuminati, the Hyperboreans, my Cockney, they wrote hundreds of books. And what was the main theme of those books? It was exposing irrationality and how the suffering of our world is really the responsibility and originates in irrationality. And they certainly hated irrationality. I mean, a lot of people, right? It's still this hate thing that you're not allowed to hate, and hate is a bad thing. And that's what I lost my job for, actually, was because I used the word hate in my book, where I said I hated that flat Earth theory was encroaching into science, right? That I used the word hate was what the diversity, equity, inclusion people were most upset about my book and fired me for. So we should not hate irrationality then? If we're not allowed to hate irrationality, then it's just so lame. It's just so stupid. I'm going to give you what the solution is in a minute here. So we don't need to live like this. We should hate irrationality in all of its forms. And here is an example of something. Now, do you think that this is rational or irrational, right? There's obviously a lot of crazy people out there who will view this little meme here and be so upset about it. Oh my gosh, well, we'll see what I'm going to link it up to here in a minute. So the West is currently defined by terrorism. We are literally defined as a society in the West by terrorism. Here's a big list. I'll read through it. I just want to say in preamble, imagine if we had none of these things. If you got rid of all of these things, imagine how much better our society would be. Well, what are they? So LGBT and gay marriage, for example, right? What is that? That's terrorism. That's terrorism against society, right? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans. That's terrorism. It's sexual terrorism, right? It's terrorism against our emotions. It's terrorism against our minds. It's terrorism against normalcy. It's terrorism against biology. It's terrorism against family. It's just terrorism against society, right? Gay marriage, terrorism against the family. That is terrorism. It's terrorism against the basic structure of our Western European culture, which is based on the family, right? It's terrorism, right? Homosexuality, terrorism. These things are the result of mental illness, and which is then itself a result of malnutrition and environmental damage, which is mainly caused actually literally by vaccines. I'll get into that in a minute. Racial integration, that was terrorism. That was terrorism against a species, terrorism against a race, right? Against a white race, that was terrorism. Forcing racial integration when it wasn't wanted and wasn't needed. What was the necessary reason for it? There wasn't. Climate change alarmism, that is absolutely terrorism against reason, terrorism against science, terrorism against mathematics. That is the height of terrorism. Scientifically, scientific materialism, right? Atheism, scientific materialism, that's terrorism against the spirit. That's terrorism against spirituality. And terrorism, again, against the mind, obviously. Terrorism against reason. Selective law enforcement, release of repeat offenders. So that's what we just saw. And I'll have an example of this in a minute. Release of repeat offenders. That's terrorism against society. And that's coming about from incompetent judges that are being hired for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some of these judges don't even have law degrees or any law experience at all. And then they get to be a judge. I don't understand how it's possible, but if you look it up in the example I'm going to give in a second, no, that's literally what's happening. Anyways, terrorism. It's terrorism against society. No-fault divorce, that's terrorism. Terrorism, again, against society, against the family. Political correctness, that's terrorism against reason. Terrorism against rationality. Terrorism against thinking, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, that's terrorism against reason, again, against normalcy. Of course, what do they use those groups for? You know, those groups came into corporations and universities. What do they use them for? Well, they're just committing terrorism mainly against white men, preventing companies and universities from hiring and employing white men. And then they're also in place to monitor all the people's thoughts. And if anybody says anything too rational, then they also get rid of them, right? So it's just a tool of terrorism. Immigration of non-Europeans into European lands, that's terrorism against Europeans, terrorism against society. Vaccines, especially the vaccine mandates, that's terrorism They cause lots of damage inside. There's no need for vaccines. They actually don't do anything. All they are is a toxin being injected into your bloodstream to make you sick, and they cause internal damage. And it's this internal damage that they're causing which then leads to perversions later in life, such as homosexuality, and also when porn is available, then it will also then contribute to porn addiction. But when babies are traumatized sufficiently, it screws up just their brain and their development in such a way that leads to perversion later in life. And so that is where you're getting this mass phenomenon of pornography production and addiction, and then homosexuality and transgenderism and all that. It's literally being caused by the trauma being induced by vaccines that we're giving our little babies. Universal health care, that's terrorism, right? Forcing healthy people to pay for unhealthy people's health care. It's not fair. And it is terrorism. And in Canada, oh yeah, we have universal health care, but it's garbage. It's terrible. In the United States, at least you can pay for it a little bit better, but even still, the insurance companies there have become totally parasitic and are basically terrorizing the population with healthcare too. Junk food, that's absolutely terrorism, right? That we even allow junk food to be produced and sold and consumed. That's terrorism against our bodies, against our health. Glyphosate farming, that we're putting glyphosate Roundup all over our fields, all over our food. We put life-killing chemicals, like these chemicals eradicate life and stop life for good. And we put them on our food and then we eat them. Like, that's terrorism. And that also contributes to childhood trauma that you don't even see. It's not obvious trauma because it's occurring inside the body. Yet subconsciously and in the brain, the body is reacting as if it is being traumatized. And then this leads to just malformed behavior later in life then. Full franchise voting. I mean, we're letting the stupidest people vote. We're letting people vote for largesse, right? Letting people vote for their own benefits. That's just a stupid idea. Pornography, that's absolutely terrorism. Having it so freely available that children can watch it, that's absolute terrorism. That's terrorism against children, terrorism against society, terrorism against marriages, terrorism against men. It's especially terrorism against men in general. And it's horrible. Public school, generally that's terrorism, especially today. Maybe we could have a better public school system, but today it is another form of terror against our children and against minds. Dual incomes, that everyone has to have dual income now to have a family, that both the mother and father have to work, which means that the mother can't be home with a kid and the kids have to go to daycare and be cared for by other people. That's absolute terrorism. Terrorism again against the family. It's financial terrorism, terrorism against children, terrorism against goodness, terrorism against innocence. It's just all sorts of terrorism. Dual citizenship, politicians, think of how ridiculous it is. That's a big problem in the United States and other countries where you have, for example, it's typically you have an Israeli citizen that is a politician in the United States. That is absolute terrorism against the local country's population and political system. Total terrorism. Mass immigration, that's, again, terrorism. Terrorism against the host population, against their jobs, against their economy. It's economic terrorism. It's all manner of terrorism. You just see how much terrorism we live under, and all these things define what it means to live in the West today. And it's all terrorism. Equality, the idea of equality, that everyone and everything is equal. That's terrorism. That is absolute terrorism. To say that everyone and everything is equal. That's absolute terrorism. Fundamentalism and illiteracy, such as, Islam and, obviously Islam with its wish to subjugate everybody and convert everybody, right? That's absolute terrorism. Judaism with its idea of being the chosen people. That is one of the most terroristic ideas in world history, that a people have chosen themselves to be God's chosen people and wrote a book about it and tried to convince everyone about it or whatever, just the treatment that it engenders. That's one of the most terroristic ideas in history. Christianity, obviously in the past, subjugated a lot of pagans, and the Europeans was definitely imposed on Europe. Certainly today's form of Christianity, not nearly as bad as what it was. There's a lot that you can just say, okay, they're just trying to make a society that works. But I mean, still there's better systems, because you still have the threat of, well, for example, hellfire, eternal condemnation in hell to be burned forever. That's a huge terroristic idea. And we've got threats of violence and assassination for speech, as we just saw with Charlie Kirk. Obviously, that's massive terrorism. Obviously, the left has been defining speech as violence so that they could justify violence for speech. You see their simple game that they've actually been playing? So like for the last 10 years, 15 years, it's been so strange how the left has been going on about speech being a form of violence. And it's been so confusing. And people have just been trying to fight against that and debate it and being like, no, speech isn't violence. But the reason why the left wanted to define it that way was so that they could commit actual violence against speech, right? So we don't need to live like this. We don't need to live this way. All of these things pretty much define what it means to live in the West today. These things are affecting us every single day. And just imagine if we had none of this. Imagine if we had none of this in the West. How utopic and wonderful and great our world would be. Our countries would be. Like, we live under the most massive coordinated form of mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical terrorism, which has ever existed, maybe? I mean, where else would you have to go to define all the, and this is just a partial list. I ran out of room. I mean, you could probably keep going. But all of these things are forms of terrorism that are terrorizing Western society and destroying it. Okay, so the contingent is incomplete. So only the monadic domain of being, or ontological mathematics itself, is consistent and complete. And so why am I bringing this up? Everything empirical suffers from Gödelian incompleteness. So that means everything in this universe. There's nothing in this universe that's absolute. That's why species come and go. That's why species go extinct. Now, we want to not go extinct, right? We want to keep on surviving. And that means we need to stop living under this terrorism, which is killing us, right? So therefore, since everything in this universe is contingent, including any given species or race, you can therefore only debate among like-minded, like-bodied individuals, because there's no solution in debate, because you will always find incomplete and inconsistent areas where the only solution is assertion. And that's what the left does, right? They just assert. They say it's not worth debating. You know, you're a effing Nazi, you're a fascist, and you should just die, right? That's literally what they say, right? So in the end, and why is that? Well, it's actually because they're just exposing Gödelian incompleteness, the incompleteness and inconsistency of the empirical world that we live in here, made of matter, right? So at some point, it's just, there's nothing more required than mere assertion, right? We want to be who we are with other people like us. And that is consistent with how every single other species on this planet has ever existed and does currently exist, and no justification is necessary for that position. You do not have to justify that position with debate or with reason. You can reference, if you like, that's how all other species and races of those species exist on this planet, right? They all want to be who they are as they are with themselves, right? Polar bears want to be polar bears. Grizzly bears want to be grizzly bears, right? They can interbreed. They're the same species, right? But they're not the same race within that species. So just like white people, right? We can interbreed with other ones, but we want to be who we are with other people like us. And no justification is necessary for that position. None. And it's a moral position, and there's nothing wrong with that position. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not immoral. It's not even hateful. It's simply wanting to be who you are. And you should be allowed to be who you are. And all of these things, all of this terrorism is trying to take that away, is trying to make it impossible for us to just be who we are. So look at this, for example. So just finishing up, Hyperborean Pythagorean Illuminism is white culture. So just look at this, for example. So this Irina girl, this happened last month, right? This is an example of the terrorism that we're living under, right? So this is the product of white society, white culture, a subway, right? But she's sharing it with something that has no clue about its value, and she gets randomly killed for it, right? So I just want to make the point that this woman is worth an infinite number of this race's individuals. An infinite number. Why? Because I'm asserting that. And I need no justification for that. Because we want to be who we are with other people like us. And this happening once, even once, is not worth it. Is not worth mixing. It even happening one time is not worth it. Because what can you actually identify as the benefit in any case? What is the benefit of racial integration, racial mixing in any case? If you want to claim it should happen for some moral reason, you must be able to point out a benefit of it. So what is exactly the benefit of it? Because here, and this is just one example, and this happens, not this exact situation, but other situations happen similarly all the time. So if this is happening even once, the benefit you can't even explain simply doesn't exist. It outweighs, right? So somebody made a nice little meme here. White Lives Matter. They didn't quite get the fear in the look of her eyes and face as is here. But anyway, it makes the point. This has no value. It has no value living with us or being with us in our society, right? None. It doesn't have to be with us, and there's no moral reason, no ethical reason, no reason based in nature for it to. Even if you went back to, like, what would have happened in the Pythagorean times in 500 BC if there was a little Greek girl, a little white Greek girl, sitting in whatever they would have had back then, a park or something like that, and a foreigner did that? Like, what would have happened? Do you think they would have just accepted it? Oh yeah, and why was this person loose? A 14-time offender. And why was he released? By an incompetent judge who was a DEI hire, a black lady judge who was a DEI hire, who didn't even have any law degree at all. Just a DEI hire to be a judge. How does that even happen? I would like that. You probably make a couple $100,000 a year doing that. Hell, give me that freaking job. No, but you can't give that to me because I wouldn't qualify for DEI, would I? Diversity, equity, inclusion. So 14 times released, committing all sorts of crimes and felonies, and then finally the 15th time really goes big, right? And just randomly murders a girl. And then he even says, wow, he's proud of it. I got that white girl, he says afterwards. So we don't need to live like this. We don't need to debate it. We simply need to assert that we want to live among our own people. And that's it. We don't need to debate it. There's no justification. And we can use whatever means are necessary to secure that. Whatever means necessary are permissible. We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children, because the beauty of the white Aryan woman must not perish from the earth. And yes, her beauty is in and of itself a virtue, and it is valuable. Beauty is virtuous. The beauty that this woman carries on the outside is reflected in the mental states and the emotions that she is able to experience on the inside, and that will also translate to children that she would give birth to, who would likewise reflect that, especially if she is a high IQ male, right? She would be able to birth a high IQ male to advance ontological mathematics and, the progression of our race and species, right? Because of her beauty encodes that she can create very high IQ children, and she was probably herself already fairly high IQ and intelligent, because it does correlate. All right, so that's it. Just a short one on making the point about terrorism. Please send me some ports so that I can get a better setup here with a better mic. And then here's my books. Probably Planet Wars and Illuminism are the best ones to read, I would say. So yeah, the Terrorism of Irrationality. That's what we suffer in the West, and we need to somehow climb our way out of this, because this is like layer after layer after layer after layer after layer of terrorism. We have like 100 or 1,000 layers of terrorism on top of us, holding us down, right? And everybody wants to be separate from it, and everybody should separate from it, right? Like, do the LGBT people like living with normal people? No, they don't. So really, we should have a complete separation and let people be who they want to be with other people like themselves, because no justification is necessary for that. Take care. Hopefully I'll have something more fun soon, and bye-bye.